Welcome back and thanks for tuning in. This is now video 8 for Just Make It, and I'm going to start today on what's probably going to turn out to be a fairly long-term project. This is my table saw. It is now the oldest of the larger pieces of equipment that I have in the shop, and it is in need of some TLC. The actual stand here is fairly good. It's quite solid still, but there's no method underneath there for catching a lot of the sawdust and chips that come down, and I definitely want to correct that. And also, I have replaced the wheels on that piece of plywood underneath so I can move it around twice now. Once actually fairly recently, and they're broken, so it makes moving it very difficult. So I want to put some good quality wheels under it, and that way, of course, I can move it a lot more simply. And while I was at it, I thought I would replace the entire stand array on the bottom. I want to make it bigger. I want to add some methods for storage under there, and then, as I said earlier, I definitely want to add something that's going to be able to deal with all that sawdust. So there are many other things wrong with this. The two most important things are the two fences. The railings for the rip fence, they're rusty at the moment, and also the guide for that is quite rusty, and I think it's also a little bit not bent, but one of the armatures underneath have a lot of difficulty engaging it, and it is again quite difficult to work with. So I want to put a whole new fence on this, and I find that I tend to use the crosscut sled far more often than I do anything else. So I don't really need the one that you can just see there right above my COVID hair. I did actually put this together a little while ago during one of our more recent lockdowns. That I don't use, so I'm going to take that off completely. And I want to put a little bit of a table extension on this so that I can deal with slightly larger pieces of wood. So those are pretty much the majority of the things I want to do in this. Today what I'm going to do though is put together, well, this is going to be the box. This is going to be where the table saw is going to sit on it. I am going to put a hole for all that dust enough to go down into a chamber where I can collect it and dispose of it, and of course keep it from going all over the shop. And I may in time hook some sort of exhaust system on that and have it go to some sort of filtration where I can remove it without having to I'll put out whatever I'm going to do for this. We'll see how that goes in time. Most important right now is to get a better, more stable stand underneath this, get some wheels on it, and be able to move it around much more simply without having to struggle with it. So that's pretty much what's going to happen today. I'm going to go through a few more details of this as we go along. I did get some requests from some of my subscribers and viewers from my other channel to do a little bit more talking on this, so I will add a little bit more than I normally do, or at least have done up till now. But there's really not a lot of extra description that needs to be done on this. It is a very straightforward build. It is a box. And I am building it, believe it or not, pretty much the same way I would build a small aquarium stand. Up to about maybe 130 gallons. Wood is perfectly fine for that. And I'm building it with what I call direct transference of weight. No joint is going to support weight. These are all just going to go directly down into, well, in this case it's going to be wheels, but normally it would be just on the floor. And I find that's very solid. It doesn't need that for this. I can lift this table saw without any great difficulty. Obviously you can't move a 130 gallon tank or even a much smaller one. So this is going to be more than strong enough. But one of the things I was finding with my old table saw is it was starting to rattle. Not a problem really, except when you want to think about if, let's say, the motor or belt or blade are getting a little bit of alignment on the actual table saw itself, the important parts. If the table saw in general is just rattling, and you may not even notice that. So a small issue that could be easily corrected by doing a little bit of tweaking and balancing could, in theory, get to the point where it's much worse and cause some damage to it. So that is actually a good thing to at least alleviate that part of it. So that's part of the goal for this. And I have actually, finished this the stand part. I do have it working now, and it is much quieter, which is Again, not necessarily important. I mean, a table saw when it's running is loud anyway. But anyway, it is a good thing to be able to see, or hear I should say, if there's anything else going wrong with that. So that's kind of nice to have. So I'm putting a lot more screws in this than I would deem necessary. Again, I don't like rebuilding things and having to reinforce later on, so I'm going to make sure it's good and solid right from the get-go. And that's pretty much everything I need to talk about on this. There is one little section going to be coming up shortly where I have to take care of a little bit of a bend in the plywood. But for the most part, I mean, this is actually probably the poorest grade of plywood I've ever bought. Thanks to COVID, in Canada here, the prices of wood just went right through the roof. If I bought what I would prefer to buy, which is either maple hardwood or oak hardwood for this plywood, it had not quite doubled in price, but it went from about, I think for maple it was just under $60 for a full sheet to $100 for a full sheet. That is an awful lot of money, and I didn't have a lot of money because, again, the same stupid reasons. So I went to this. This is still good two-side plywood, but it is, I think it's, I don't actually remember now. I don't think it's spruce, but I think it is, again, a softer wood. It was still quite expensive. I'd only saved, well, from what I used to pay, it was almost actually the same price. But if I were to buy the harder woods, I saved about $35, I think, for the sheet. In retrospect, it doesn't really matter, I suppose, but I probably should have just spent the extra $35 and had the higher quality wood, because you can see a bit of splintering there on some of the cuts as we go along. It's not going to come into it a whole lot in the long term because it's just a stand, and it can be painted and all sorts of stuff to hide that sort of thing. But anyway, not really important. It just bothered me a little bit because of what used to be available. I mean, what's Canada good for? We grow a lot of trees, oil, and a few other things. And wood used to be one of the things that were relatively cheap, and unfortunately, because of some what I like to consider profiteering, it is no longer the case. So this particular upright here, which is going to form part of the cabinetry or general storage, I haven't yet even decided. This one actually worked out pretty good. This was nice and straight. It didn't require any kind of tweaking. But you see that piece of wood spacer that's there? I'm using that as I go along to make sure all the screws get placed properly so I don't have any pops. But this particular sheet here, this little upright, as I move the square up, you can see it has a bit of a deflection there. That is wholly because of the wood being a bit warped, and that's another good reason why I put together these uprights, like the spacers, because it easily deals with that. So it just keeps everything where it needs to be. So when I go to put drawers or whatever I tend to end up deciding to do with this, it just keeps it from, like I said, from being more difficult at that point. It's kind of bizarre seeing my hair this way. Fortunately, we're no longer in lockdown, and I've had my hair cut since then, but it got quite wild. We had, in all total, 4 lockdowns. Not all as extreme as the first 2, but the barber shops were always the ones that were hit really hard, and it was very difficult to get in and get your hair cut. But anyway, enough of that. I'm sure you've already heard more than you need to hear for a lifetime of COVID nonsense. So this is just a simple matter now of putting a few more screws in, and this is about as far as I'm going to get in this video. It was, again, a very straightforward, easy box to put together, and it is very solid. I'm actually really enjoying working with it because, first off, it's much simpler to move, and it is a lot more sturdy than the old one. The problem when you have a little bit of a broken wheel is it can rock a little bit, and this one doesn't at all. It is a little bit heavier as well too, so that also supplies a nice bit of rigidity. So it looks like I'm going to end up talking through this whole thing. It wasn't really intending to do that, I was hoping just to keep that to a reasonable amount. But for those of you who actually wanted me to do this, there you go. That's my gift. You get to hear my monotone voice go on even longer. So the next step for this is next video. It may not be the next video up, but the next video for this series, I'll put the wheels on. I'm going to drill the hole, or sorry, cut the hole for the table saw is going to sit. I still actually haven't bolted that in place. I haven't decided exactly how to do it. Oh, here, this is another reason, like I mentioned earlier, for cutting this. It's perfect for making sure that this gets straightened out and straightened out exactly where I want it to be. And the nice thing about it, because the other side is now screwed in place, it will only move the part that's warped. So there you go. It's nice and straight now. So yeah, I'm going to put that in place. And then in future videos, I'll get to working on the other things I need to do for this. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave comments. I enjoy getting them. I definitely answer them all. And let me know what you think. If there's actually other projects. One of the things I am currently working on, which is much further after this, is I'm making a sanding block, because I needed to use one for some acrylic jobs I have to do for a client. So anyway, just let me know what you want, and like I said, next video will take care of this. And again, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and bye for now.